Ajax, it's nice to have a term for it, but really it isn't awfully accurate in its original meaning. So what is Ajax? What are we left with? Well, Ajax really is an approach to remote scripting. As I mentioned, it was introduced, or the technology behind it, which is this thing you'll see on the slide called XML HTTP request. That was introduced by Microsoft to Internet Explorer so that they could try to actually update their Outlook web access. If you know Outlook, it's an email client, in real time, which of course now everybody takes for granted. But before Microsoft did that, back in around about 2000, there wasn't a way for a browser to get an update from the server without actually either reloading the page or using frames. And we're not going to talk that much about frames in the course at all. We do mention them occasionally, but they're generally considered something to avoid. They're very bad for usability, and they're even worse for security because of the problem of not knowing where these frames have actually come from. So Ajax relies on these server requests, and that's probably where the X in Ajax came from this API call. They're referred to as Application Program Interface call XML HTTP request, but the XML HTTP request does not have to request XML, nor does it actually have to request HTTP, but it's just a name that's been applied to that. You can return anything. You can actually return HTML. You can return just a single byte of data, which is what our case study actually does. So it doesn't have to be fancy at all. As long as both ends agree what they're doing, then it doesn't really matter. What we typically then do, we get some data back from a server somewhere, and we use the document object model, which is the standard way of representing an HTML page inside the browser to make changes to the current page. And those changes include things like showing pop-up windows if you wish, changing the contents of page elements, hiding, deleting, or moving page elements. You can animate page elements. You can cause them to disappear or delete them from the page. The document object model, the DOM, we're going to refer to it as, is just the programmatic way of updating pages in more or less real time. And these days, some years on from the original applications of Ajax, we tend to see and hear Ajax being used just to mean something that is somewhat interactive. So, for example, Ajax controls don't necessarily have anything to do with the original Ajax. They're just more interactive than the standard HTML controls. So Ajax has meant other things in the past. These days it just means more or less interactivity, unless you're talking specifically about an Ajax call. If somebody says to you, I'm using Ajax to get this data, then they specifically mean something around the XML HTTP request neighborhood.